Welcome to the American Small Business League podcast. I am Bruce Taurus, and with me is Jerrod Sessler, who's running for the House in 2026 in Washington State in the 4th District. His website for more information is jerrodforcongress.com. Jerrod, Jerrod, forcongress.com. Jerrod is the product of a difficult and impoverished childhood. He is a poster child for the American dream. He served in the U.S. Navy, had numerous entrepreneurial achievements, and hit his lifelong goal of competing in NASCAR. Jerrod, thank you very much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for that introduction. I look forward to this discussion. One of the things that is appropriate for this in the interesting things that I've accomplished in my life is I've been in business for over 30 years, and it's a very interesting space and something that I think every single American should go after.
Nice. Entrepreneurialism. Do you want to describe your latest endeavor?
Yeah, so let's see. I've done so many. But I will say that, my biggest focus right now is running for Congress. I actually sold my company after I saw what happened in the 2020 election. Stepping back a little bit, I did not really have much interest, or I should say, I never saw myself getting involved in politics until 2012 when Obama was reelected, and I was so shocked that we did that I really felt like it was time, and that I needed to, start learning about civics and look at potentially getting involved. And it wasn't until over 10 years later, thank goodness for places like Hillsdale College and Dennis Prager and Epoch Times and things like that to help me raise my civics understanding of how this country is supposed to run. And books like The Original Intent by David Barton and and others, many others. Saving Nine recently by Mike Lee is very good. So just really felt like I had to educate myself. I'm a double engineer major, manufacturing, mechanical engineering, and ultimately I'm a process guy. So everything I look at has a cycle, and every time that cycle comes around, you have an opportunity to make changes, improvements, adjustments, and then you can step back and watch what's coming out the front door, so to speak, if you're thinking of a factory, and make adjustments if you don't like what it is. And the government is no different. The government is a system. And unfortunately, we have people in this country and this world who don't believe in rules and laws, and they do everything they can to thwart the system of government that God has blessed us with. God's given us three main pillars in life, and especially here in America. Number one is marriage, number two is church, and number three is government. And when you look at everything that is under attack today, it's those three things. And running for Congress, I won the last primary. Unfortunately, I live in a state where they have a thing called the jungle system. And so I was forced to face the incumbent, who is a terrible uh, representative, but he calls himself a Republican. He's one of the 10 who voted to impeach President Trump. And he was rescued by about $3 million of uh, special interest money in the general. And then, of course, when you have a Republican on Republican, I'm endorsed by President Trump. My opponent is not, and he sides with the Democrats a lot of the time with the votes. All of the Democrats in the district voted for him as well, and so it was a very close race. But unfortunately, I lost. So I'm gonna run again. We're less than a year from the next primary, and we'll disinfect the seat at some point and get an opportunity to take my many years of business to Washington, D.C. and do some good for the people.
Nice. Well, elaborate on that. What are the broad major good things you want to do for your district?
Well, there's a lot of things. I'll say that one of the big things is just having the influence to be able to impact things that happen in our state. Washington State is in a terrible position. It is really what's called a collective dictatorship. Some people call it a democracy. It's supposed to be a republic according to our Constitution. We're guaranteed that, but it is a collective dictatorship. It is so corrupt and so crazy. 40 plus years of Democrat rule, illegitimate election systems. 9 out of 10 representatives side or are Democrats. That's for congressional seats. The majority of our state legislature is Democrat, and so we have a lot of work to do here in America. And I think that I can have, or in our state of Washington, I think I can have a big impact on that from a position of influence like congressional representative. In terms of what I want to do in Congress, or to remember, you're one of 435 people, so you have very little that you can straightforward just do without relationships. I'm endorsed by the House Freedom Caucus, which is packed with, some of our favorites in Washington, D.C., the people that really care about liberty and defending our Constitution. I very much like a lot of the things that President Trump is doing. I've said for years that we need to decentralize and deregulate Washington, D.C. If you read the 10th Amendment in the Constitution, and then you look at the way our system of government operates today, the federal government is way too big, has way too long of arms, and it has weakened the state governments, which is not the way it is supposed to be. And so, obviously there's the fundamental conservative things that I want to press for, but um, the truth is a lot of this revolves around money. If people don't have the ability to make money and to be successful in a capitalist America, then something is wrong. And a massive overregulated populace as a result of their government is never going to work in America. And so, I would fight for things that support that. And I look forward to doing it. And I'm thankful to have dozens of good friends that are in Congress now that are hopeful and helpful to get me there. And hopefully we'll get a chance to do that here in less than a year.
Nice. I know that first time candidates for Congress instantly get confronted with the question, how much money have you raised? As if that is the requirement to get the ear of the powers that be in any party, let alone their support. How have you dealt with that challenge?
Well, it's a wise, astute question, and fundraising is very difficult. And obviously, candidates have to do a lot of it. I've given my life for this cause. I don't, and I think this is the case for most candidates. They don't take money regardless of how much they raise. It goes into the campaign. So when people donate to my campaign, they're not sending money to me. They're sending money to my campaign to make it possible, to make it more possible for me to win. Let's see, we sold our company over 3 years ago. Uh, I have not had an income in roughly 3.5 years. We have put in well over $1 million. And, when you combine that with not having income, that it's been a, well over $2 million investment for me. We have raised, I think, around $700,000 during that time, and it still wasn't enough. So it's difficult. So I actually just recently, this last year, since losing the last general, have decided to kind of get back into some business stuff, which I've been doing because I can make more money than I can, spending a lot of time. And I'm just being candid. I very much appreciate people that are willing to donate, and please do. But it's annoying to me to spend, 7 hours on the phone making phone calls and walk away with, a couple $1,000s or something. It's just not, it's not as fruitful, I think, as business. And so anyway, I've kind of dove back into some of that, several different little businesses that I think we can produce a good amount of revenue from in a short amount of time. And we'll see. And we'll still do some fundraising. I'm just not gonna. I'm instead of taking that time that I would have spent, diving in on the phones, I'm just pouring it into business stuff, which I'm really good at. And now I'll be 56 in a couple weeks here. I have a lot of experience in business. I've been very successful at it, and I love it. It's a lot of fun. And I look forward to serving in Congress and coming back to my business and to my business life at some point in the future after we get this country fixed. So one of the things that people have to realize is I love President Trump. I love what he's doing. He has an amazing family. He's done God's work in this country is totally unbelievable. But we have to realize that he's not always going to be there, and the corruption is, and the dissension is, and the dirtbags that want to take down America and turn it into a globalist, dictatorship or communism or whatever, are still going to be there because those people exist. And so, as much as I'm thankful for what's happening, I realize that there is never going to be a shortage for good leadership in Washington, D.C.
No, let alone space for, an honest person who's candid and open and tells the truth. Before I bring our audience up to speed with my major concerns and my letter to you that led to this conversation, what would you briefly say about to folks who uh, hear what you say, love what you say, but are rather convinced, the corruption, et cetera, is not a one-party thing, that there's plenty, that can be laid at the feet of both parties. It would be tempting to infer from the things that you've said that the Republicans are, these are my words, the Republicans are white hat, truth telling, honest, uncorrupted folks, and the Democrats are, black hat, corrupted. What do you say to that, to the nuance that I'm describing here?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'll say there's some differences. And let me just openly say up front, and this is one of my most frustrating facts about politics is our party is not unified. Our party has factions in it, more so than the Democrat Party. Uh, the the libertarian folks tend to side with us today more consistently than what they did in the past because we tend to be more on the side of freedom and liberty, free business, leave us alone, get your hands off of us, those kinds of things. Uh, the Democrat Party is very good at organizing themselves, and they are and certainly this is not to offend any Democrats that are on there. I just think that when you look at what's happened over the last few years, if you're really going to be honest with yourself and look at what the Democrats have done, it's appalling in terms of the American way. The typical Democrat politician wants to control people. They want a dictatorship. And that is the big difference between a typical Democrat politician versus a Republican. The Republicans tend to be more hands off. They would more likely say, just leave me alone and let me do my thing. Where Democrats are like, no, we need to control everything, and that includes you and your family and your life and your job and your business and everything that you do, even your thought and your speech. That's kind of their modus operandi these days. And if Democrats disagree with that, then they will be shunned by their own party in today's world. Now, the Republicans are much more complicated and they're not unified. They sometimes they side with the Democrats, but let me tell you why it is. And this is probably going to be shocking to a lot of people. For most of my life, we were doing life, doing business, raising a family. We homeschooled 3 kids, been married for almost 30 years, lots of years in business. That's what most of us were doing. Maybe working in a career, building a life, paying for a home, doing all this kind of stuff. And we weren't really thinking about who was going to these elected positions. The people that were going to the elected positions on our side, on the Republican side, are the people that were willing to go because there wasn't a huge bull rush. There wasn't a lot of people who were interested in it like there is today. People like me who don't really care so much about the notoriety or the political aspects of it. We just want to be one of the league of good people that really cares about our country, that wants to make a difference. So fundamentally, when you look at these two sides, the Democrat recruits people that want to control others. The Republicans tend to recruit people by nature of the fact that they're frustrated with the way things are happening and they're not controlling people. I spent most of my years in in franchising. I built national franchise brands, and the whole idea with that is local autonomy. We want people to run their own businesses. We're just going to help supply support and systems and training and a lot of times technology over the last 25 years, those kinds of things. And so I think that's the issue. The one point that I'll make that is kind of shocking and might offend some people is, and again, I'm saying this from someone who gets to speak back in DC in front of many congressmen on a regular basis. I was back there for the Army Parade just a few weeks ago and was invited to speak to a group of 30 or 40 representatives without invitation. They just found out I was in town. There isn't, and again, I'm not talking about any particular person, and I'm not trying to be offensive with this. The reality is a lot of the people in Congress are not that bright. And again, I'm not pointing at any one person. And what I mean by that is they're not universally knowledged. So they don't have this broad spectrum of experience like I do. Like you look at my life. Um, I was raised in a difficult circumstances. I learned from that. I went into the military. I served. I got to travel the world. I went to college, so I have degrees. I understand that side. I'm obviously not low IQ. I wouldn't have been able to accomplish a lot of the things that I've done. I've ran businesses for over 30 years. I made lots of money. We raised kids. I managed to get married to an amazing woman and stay married for almost 30 years. So I learned a lot there. We homeschooled and raised three kids. I've failed more times than I've succeeded, but I've always had backstops that would, make sure I wasn't going to lose it all or whatever. So I was just wise about that. And so I'll say
You,
that I'm
Jerrod,
kind of
you're
unique.
making great points. You've completely fulfilled, my curiosity for the questions I did queue up. I could anticipate many more conversations with you. I want you to conclude your thought, but that I do want to take it into our next topic that we've planned. So, how would you conclude kind of this segment we're in right now?
Well, I would just say this, and I'm not trying to be offensive to anybody that's in Congress, but I'm just telling people they're maybe not quite as knowledgeable or as smart or as multi-talented as you think. They rely a lot on other people, and we need more people that are really uh, broad in their knowledge as I am. I'm not saying I'm perfect or I'm the end
Right.
all or be all, but I've been successful outside of government, and I think
Yeah.
that's a very important factor. I'm not looking to get rich in government.
Right.
I'm
These
looking
are
to, for the betterment of our country. So, yeah.
great points. For the record, I'm nonpartisan. The American Small Business League is nonpartisan. I'll listen to everybody personally. I've got, opinions and arguments that I don't bring into this podcast. And I just want to also thank you for throwing your hat in the ring and the sacrifices it does entail. Um, let's make a mental note if we talk in the future. I hope we do. I'd love to dig into the franchise experience that you have. I'm quite alarmed by a particular development, which is private equity firms buying and then controlling franchises and then implementing policies in a community where they do own a number of the different local businesses that people don't know are franchises, and it's almost a, if I could well describe it in the future, it's a really outrageous and even scandalous type of development. I can't even ask you what you know about that, Jerrod, because I got to take us into our next portion, if
Yeah,
that's
100%.
okay.
And I'll just say that I agree with you. I understand it. And it's not the only area that private equity is flexing its muscles in ways that we probably don't appreciate.
Indeed, in terms of buying homes, et cetera, and rental properties, and just raising the cost of everything
Yeah.
with their models.
Farmland is another
Yep.
big one.
And huge. And one more compliment to you. I love how you describe from 2012, Hillsdale College, et cetera, epic times, to get to develop your personal understanding and examination of first principles. What were we intended to be? It
Yeah.
starts with the Constitution. It starts with the founding. It starts with so much hidden facts about their writings, their goals, their ideas that we can go into in the future. Now, just to bring us to the kind of the foundation of our conversation, which is we reached out to you as we are reaching out to about 1,000 candidates for the House and Senate next year to educate them about the issue we wrote you about and to see if we could have a conversation about it, which is particularly this. Every year, 23% of all federal procurement through contracts is supposed to go to our small businesses. Most people, many people, Jerrod, don't know that 99.9% of all businesses in America are small businesses. We are a small business nation. 98% of all businesses have less than 100 employees. And every year, the SBA says we met the goal. More than 23% of federal contracts went to small businesses. And our 35 years of legal victories, dozens of congressional investigations, and many reports from the SBA's Office of Inspector General has shown every year billions in small business contracts go to big businesses. And if one considers a company with less than 100 employees a legitimate small business, 98% of all businesses, every year, in fact, only about 3% of those small businesses, of real small businesses, get about 3% of federal contract dollars, meaning 97% of the estimated 800 billion federal procurement budget for 2025 is going to 0.1% of businesses that are big businesses. Today, companies with 500, 1,000 employees, 2,000 employees get small business contracts from various federal agencies. And the tip of our spear is to say that women are half the population. They own 40% of all businesses, and yet they're supposed to get only 5% of federal contract dollars. And in reality, they get far less than that. And that lack of economic equality prevents them from having political equality because men earn and save more, Jerrod. They're able to contribute more to politicians. They're giving them more influence. And also, it's easier for men to run for office. And 75% of all legislatures and Congress, those seats are held by men. And about 68%, I believe, of all the governorships are men. And about 90% of all committee chair positions and party leadership positions are men. So our simple first request is to excite you and all candidates, and we're also writing the small business committees of the House and the Senate, please raise from 5% to 15% the federal contract dollars that must go to women-owned small businesses. That would raise from 23% to 33% the amount that are supposed to go to small businesses in general. And if that happens, and let's say when that happens, that's $264 billion of business poured into our small businesses, into the middle class economy. And the small businesses would have to create 3.3 million jobs to do that work, on top of the 2 million jobs America typically creates every year. Jerrod, in other words, it would be an economic boom of epic proportions, tax-free, no new taxes, no new spending, debt-free, deficit neutral, if we could do three things: raise the amount that goes to women-owned small businesses from 5 to 15%, make official the definition of a small business as up to 100 employees, not the 500, 1,000, 2,000 employees in a company, and also make the SBA, the Small Business Administration, prove that small business contracts go to small businesses. You have to sue to find out, who did you give these contracts to? And much of the blame is at the feet of the Pentagon and the Defense Department, because they get 50% or so of the procurement budget. That's the gift to a candidate like you, is to absorb that, get convinced, and test it with your constituents for the next year to the primary, and teach them these realities about how small businesses are being deprived what the law says that they should have. So, Jerrod, what are your thoughts about any or all that?
Yeah, well, it's good. And thankfully, because of our email exchange, you already know what my position is on this. But there's a lot here. Number one, this first of all, Bruce, I think that you should, and I would be happy to recommend you, you should look at running the SBA. You should look at figuring out how to get into that position because that is the number one problem with this. It's not so there is a lot that we can do from Congress, and I think there's some changes that we can make. Number one, the definition of small business. Right now, the definition of small business is too big. Most of the businesses that I have owned and ran and built in my life would be considered micro businesses, which is something below small business, and people don't realize that. The SBA's vision is not really on American family-owned small businesses. It's a notch up from that, and that's one of the challenges because a lot of that money should be going to what I consider to be micro businesses. So we need a definition change there, which is something that Congress can do and something that I would fully support and would be excited to work on and to present. Number two, the reason why I suggest that you should look at getting involved into SBA leadership is because part of the reason why there's a couple big reasons why these contracts don't go to truly small businesses, but one of them is because SBA just doesn't have the organization to be able to administer contracts with that many truly small companies who don't have a lot of the infrastructure on their side. Uh, because they are perceived to be more difficult to work with and more risky because they don't have 27 admin staff and all this kind of stuff, which points to one of the other reasons why a lot of this stuff happens is because they don't have the administrative staff to actually go out and seek these contracts. They never actually know that they exist, so they don't apply for them. They don't understand the process and the hoops that you have to jump through. So there's a few things. Now,
Can we look at each one of those? What you're calling micro business, what are you defining as what ballpark size are you calling a micro business?
well, I mean, so I've owned a bunch of different companies. One of the companies that I owned, I actually sort of fell into as a result of a need that we saw, and we ended up having our kids run it as they were growing up. Now that company produced, in its heyday, and it's been going for more than 15 years, it was producing uh, maybe around 300,000 a year. So it
Jerrod,
was
I just want to mention the average company in America has between 4 and 10 employees. And most small business, 98% of all businesses in America have less than 100. So whether you call it micro, whether you call it a non-employer firm, because the vast majority of small businesses are just the owner, they are non-employer. And yet, what we're talking about is just making Congress, making the SBA, making the director of the SBA truly work for America's small businesses. I love that. I'm flattered you mentioned, look into leadership at SBA. Would that any president would get an administrator in there who truly worked for the interests of America's small businesses? I'll just say, frankly, one of our major points we make is we think President Trump and this administration is setting up the SBA to fail, and here's why. Representing 99.9% of all businesses in America, the SBA ought to have, and this is something you were describing, a much more robust, capable staff and budget. We think it should have one of the biggest budgets comparatively to any agency in Washington. It's got one of the smallest, and under this administration, it just got cut in about half, which is going to eliminate about half the staff. And yet, it's supposed to get the $1.7 trillion student loan portfolio to manage. after headlines were just made a few months ago, oh, the SBA mismanaged $630 million in loans. How's it going to manage 1.7 trillion? That's not its mandate. That's not its business to manage the student loans.
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
and also they're closing cities for political reasons. Cities that would need a robust SBA there to help small businesses. And in one of your replies to me by email, Jerrod, you talked about the numbers I had sent you, and if I recall, you were describing they became references to loans for small businesses. And you're not to be blamed to hear SBA and think loans. That's a branding strategy for decades now because unfortunately, Washington, captured by the biggest businesses, this is our spin, this is our take, and we've got all this documentation on our website, asbl.com, to expose the fraud and corruption that prevents small businesses from getting the small business contracts. The SBA works 24/7 to talk about loans, 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 and then maybe some counseling, start a business, grow a business. Here's how to do marketing and sales. And you have to click around to see that they also talk about federal contracts that small businesses can apply for. And then there's the whole issue, my last point before I reply, there's the whole issue of how hard it is to figure out how do you apply and what contracts are available. You have to hunt and seek. Whereas if there was an agency, the SBA, which is supposed to represent the interests of America's small businesses, it ought to have big, obvious doors. Click and learn how to apply. Click and see what contracts are available. And here are all the small businesses we proudly made sure got these contracts instead of us having to sue to find out who did you give those so-called small
Right.
business contracts to. So that's been our experience for the last 35 years, our founder, and we've been formally in existence since
Mhm.
2004. Um, I pause to ask, what do you
Well,
make of those
yeah, and
points, Jerrod?
I think that it could come across as though I'm stroking your ego when I say that you should get involved in leadership. But I'm not. The reason why I say that is when I sit and listen to you, you obviously know the issues, you know what's actually happening. It is not uncommon for our government at every level to manipulate the data that they're pushing out to the public. And obviously that's what's happening within the SBA. If they're saying that they're meeting their 23% goal, but they're not, and yet they're saying that they are, then what's really going on? And I will say kind of the same thing in a much shorter way as I said about members of Congress. The people that are leading the SBA are just people. They're probably very excited about being in those positions, and maybe they're doing a better job right now under President Trump. I don't know. We don't have enough time to tell, how they're doing, but I'm just saying that if you put someone in there who doesn't understand it at the fundamental level that you do, then what kind of an outcome do you expect to get? You're going to see, think about this at all these agencies, pretty much most of the staffing, the bureaucracy, it has been there through multiple presidencies. They know how to do what they do and they do what they
Yeah,
do. And
yeah.
it has no connection to what you and I are talking about. Um,
What you're saying right now, Jerrod, impresses me so tremendously. It means you've got an open mind because basically what I just did was describe to you how the official story of the SBA and the contracting is a lie. And you sound open-minded enough to continue listening to it. So I almost want to invite us to consider wrapping up this conversation because it's an opportunity to pour into your open mind a lot more facts, figures, and stories, Jerrod. For instance, our founder, Lloyd Chapman, he's uh, brought me on as director of communications to kind of lead, these kind of public efforts and things like that. For decades, was winning lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit from various agencies just to find out who did you give those small business contracts to? It used to be
right.
more accessible. He would go to the SBA to talk to their communication director or try to talk to the administrator. And what he saw, and through all the lawsuits and the different lawyers that the SBA brought into the courtroom or brought into the negotiating room, he describes how the SBA is basically a front for the Pentagon, that former Pentagon top level officials have rotated in and out of being the spokesperson or media relations for the SBA. Because, like
Okay.
I've alluded, the Pentagon is the biggest bully when it comes to getting federal contract dollars. And it's part of the whole diagnosis that'll sound familiar to you that Washington is in the grips of the military industrial complex, at least since 1961, January 17th, Eisenhower's farewell address.
Mhm.
I know I'm preaching to the choir here with that history, Jerrod. So, what would you say in terms of kind of final wrap up summary of everything we've talked about and what you might make with this, these ideas?
Well, I think I'm going to go very broad with this because this is really what I believe and what I'm living out in my own life. If people are listening to this and this resonates with you, then I would challenge you to ask you, what are you doing to get involved? What are you doing? How are you contributing? It's not just about writing a check because you've been very successful and you have the financial ability. I very much appreciate that. But in terms of saving our country and fixing things like this, what are you doing? Are you willing to stand up and go get involved and maybe apply for a job at the SBA or within the administration to be appointed to some sort of leadership to see what happens? That's what I believe we have to do. We have to stand up, we have to get involved. The only way we're going to understand this to the depth and level that you do, Bruce, is if you actually get involved and you study it. Now, for example, there's other things that people could do. They could get involved in the ASBL and you guys could start an arm that literally hand walks small businesses into a contract situation, into a successful contract situation. And you do it over and over and over again. I don't know if that's something that you guys do, but it's certainly something that you could do if you had the people and you had the resources to be able to do that. Because I agree, it's difficult to get certified under some of these what do they call them? Minority type situation, women owned, minority owned, whatever. It's difficult to get certified for those. And then it's also difficult just to understand what the contract process is to be successful about submitting a contract. And at the end of the day, none of that is going to overcome corruption that is controlling the results, that has their feet on the scales. And so, how are we going to find that out? We're going to find that out by getting involved. A good friend of mine says, the future belongs to those who show up. So that would be my question. If you're listening to this, are you willing to show up? Are you willing to write a check to me for my campaign so that I can show up? Or are you willing to get involved in the ASBL? Or are you willing to go to DC and spend a few years there digging around, working in the SBA, trying to figure out what's going on and how we can support small business in America so they can thrive? It's very important to me.
You just described the bullseye of possibility, hope, and also demonstrating your wisdom and reflection you have given about what's the opportunity about being an American, what's the opportunity to be a human being, which is
Yeah.
to think for yourself, question authority. I can't tell you how impressed I am by that reply about the number one thing to always challenge folks, young, middle age, or old, beginning and ever. It's like, well, what do you want, and what do you want to do? What are you willing to do for it? What do
Yeah.
you want, and what are you willing to do for it?
Well, let me just, Bruce, let me just put a point, and sorry to interrupt you, but let me put a point on this. Many people love this country. They love this country for reasons that they like to define in their own head. But the truth is, the reason they love this country is because of prosperity. It's because of capitalism. It's because of success. It's because you can live the American dream in America. But there's a misconception about this that people have to understand. Capitalism equals opportunity, but opportunity doesn't fill your bank account without hard work. And that's what people have to realize. This land is filled with opportunities, but if you're coming here looking for freebies and you're not willing to insert the hard work, the long hours, the frustration, and you're not willing to pay the price of getting the education that is way more valuable than college, of just walking through that pathway, then you don't understand what it means to be an American. And I would encourage everyone, just as much as I encourage you to get involved if you want to fix the problems, I would encourage you that if you want to be successful in America, then you have to take that American opportunity and you have to combine it with lots of hard work.
I couldn't agree more. And I seed a future conversation with you about public school and how it produces lethargic, broken, traumatized, obedient people with no sense of personal power, and it's by intention. And I don't know if you know the author John Taylor Gatto, the Dumbing Down of America. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah. Yeah. People without
Okay.
vision. Yeah.
Well, right. So it's whether you're born here or whether you've come here. One of the major crises, and then I got to wrap it up, is the sense of powerlessness that is embedded, is cultivated intentionally by the systems of power, the systems from the elite who've influenced the school experience and the media and the culture. It's summed up in that awful phrase, you can't fight City Hall. But everything you're representing and a lot of what we talked about today, Jerrod, is all about what do you want and what are you willing to do for it? And that makes us forever young and hopeful and bristling with possibilities if someone's willing to start trying, because with experience comes all the wisdom, knowledge, education that one needs, which you implied.
100%.
Thank you very much for your time today. To be continued after I kill the recording. A couple questions for you, but I do want to thank you so much, Jerrod. JerrodForCongress.com, JERROD for Congress.com. And with that, I will thank everybody for watching and listening today.